Hey, welcome back to The Good, the Bad, and the Techie, where we're here to talk all about leading edge tech for the enterprise, mid market, all sizes of company. I'm VP of Research, John Collins.
And I'm Howard Holton, CTO here at GigaOm.
And this week, we're going to try and cut through the jargon and give you what you need to make sense of it all. We're going to be talking about platforms, low code, lots of exciting things. So let's do it.
So hey, John, what do you think of that new intro we've got? It's kind of
I mean, it just threw me completely. It's like I have no idea what to do
now. Well, welcome to episode 1. if that wasn't clear before. So how are things on the other side of the pond there, John?
Things are warm and sunny, or absolutely freezing cold, just as you'd expect early summer in the UK. But
we had a tornado warning here yesterday in Denver. First time. It's funny. I went to go look up the stats, and before we moved, I looked up the stats in Colorado and kind of the Denver metro area. Denver metro gets tornadoes, but in 130 years, there's never been more than a Sev 1. And a Sev 1 basically like a rip off a poorly built roof, but it doesn't really do a whole lot of other damage. We do, however, get hail. And I don't mean hail like, oh, that's neat, it's a frozen snowflake. I mean hail like every baseball that's ever been pitched is now falling from the sky.
Oh, good Lord.
Right. So, of course, I go on yesterday and I go, this is the first time we've had a tornado warning in Douglas County since I've been here. What are the statistics? Well, of course, the statistics have only been aggregated up to 2012. We moved here in 2013. So no statistics for the last 10 years, which has been let's say less than useful. But my wife was terrified.
I don't know if God exists, but he's one heck of a juggler.
And a joker.
Isn't he just?
I mean,
when he's throwing those sorts of things down, I mean, there goes your sunroof, right?
Right. I mean, there goes the cars that are parked outside, and thankfully that tends to happen more frequently a little bit further east of us. Like there's a ridge of hills behind us. On the other side of that, you get into the plains. Eastern Colorado is all plains. Western Colorado is all mountains. And once you get into the plains, the hail damage gets to be pretty severe.
So what have you been up to? Where have you been?
So what was it, last week? Oh, time flies. Last week I was at Appian World out in San Diego, which unlike my home, which had a freak snowstorm the week before, this was on the back bay in San Diego. So the hotel walked right out onto the water. When I wasn't
jealous.
Yes. I was very jealous to not be there, not be living in the area anymore, which made it a rare sight. But when I wasn't having coffee leaned up against a railing, staring at the water.
Yeah, just rub it in, why don't you?
Every chance I get. I was talking to Appian customers, Appian partners, about kind of the state of low code, no code, RPA automation-y stuff. And in addition, hearing some of their new announcements. And it kind of, like, I've been a big fan of low code, no code RPA for a long time. I don't think there's any technology that has the potential to be so positively and personally disruptive inside an organization than those tools, right? On one hand, you have RPA, which allows you to automate things that are just time wasters, right? Moving data from one place to another, especially in legacy systems that don't have, clear and clean APIs. RPA is fantastic at doing that. Automating tasks that people would otherwise click next 40, 50, 60 times a day or a week.
Let's just expand that out for anyone that doesn't know. It's robotic process automation. Essentially, it's like the best screen scraper and automation product you could ever have. It takes what you wanted to do and it enables you to automate it, whatever the application is. Fair?
That's completely accurate. Unlike kind of old screen scrapers, right, which record specifically what you do, they're far more intelligent now, and they can they can recognize elements, they can recognize UI UI components like buttons and checkboxes and clicks and headers and those sort of things. They can also interact with APIs, which is super helpful. If one side of the equation has an API available to it and the other side doesn't, like maybe you need to pull from an old AS400 system, or you need to pull from some sort of legacy system that doesn't have an API, and then on the other side you're going to feed into something like a data warehouse or a modern data platform or whatever, or an order entry system even. So that's a huge time saver inside an organization. Takes a bit to set it up, has a little bit of kind of care and feeding, especially as you do upgrades or systems change, but otherwise they've been very reliable, and the ROI is incredibly quick. Matter of fact, last company we did one workflow for finance, just one, and had a less than 30-day ROI on the annual cost of the dedicated system necessary to run it.
It's crazy.
Well, what was crazy was you buy this particular tool we used. You buy as a 24-hour license, right? You effectively get one CPU cycle, but 24 hours of that CPU time. This whole thing that we got the ROI on ran in less than 4 seconds every day. So when we went to go look for a second one, well, there were two problems. The first was no one knew where the laptop went that they put the system on, which I found to be hilarious. They literally lost the laptop somewhere. It was running. It was still doing its job. Just nobody knew where it was, where they put it, why they put it on a laptop. I don't know. It was before I got there.
I think it's up here. I think it's yeah.
Yeah, I
found it.
It's like that old story. Do you remember that story of the company that did the remodel? And they had this one server that they just couldn't find. It had been a few years. They couldn't find the server, couldn't find its own Novell server, couldn't find it. Finally, they found the switch port that it was plugged into, tracked the cable back, and the cable went into a wall, like literally just disappeared through the wall. They had done a remodel at some point and put up new drywall to put cubes in, knocked down the wall, and found this old Compaq server that had been sitting and running behind the wall with 11 years of uptime. Never been rebooted, never been patched, never been updated. Was just sitting there running, serving files.
I'm fine.
Yeah. All good, guys.
It's been okay. It's almost like, I don't know, someone from Monsters Inc. or something. It was fine. It was fine. It was okay. I didn't have a problem.
But the thing about Appian that I liked, so that's RPA, right? Robotic Process Automation, which I love that name because it is so self-describing. It tells you exactly what it does. It uses little mini robots to automate processes, right? I wish everything was named so well. Right?
It just does the thing.
It just tells you what it does right there on the package, right on the box. Right? Yeah. I don't know how many times I've walked around a conference, and I used to be, as a customer, I used to be famous for this, right? I'd take the little thing they'd scan, I'd take it out of my badge and put it in my back pocket, and then I would walk the expo floor, and if I couldn't figure out what you did, you didn't get to scan me, and you didn't get to talk to me, and you didn't get to call me. The only places I would stop is where I could look at your booth and I knew what you did. Right?
Yeah, we did similar. We went to the data center show a couple of months ago in London, and generally data centers are the other way around. They're not very good at marketing, which means they're very good at explaining what they do. So it's like they just say, yeah, cabling systems, or like big racks. Look at the size of it. But then every now and then you'd see the one that had clearly had the image branding consultants in, and it would have words like synergies and kind of stuff
describing
like that.
Synergies across workflows. What
exactly. And you were like, no.
Yep.
I don't know who they're going to do business with, but it ain't going to be me.
Nope. I don't like to be blinded with bullshit, as it were. Right. All right, so the second piece of kind of this world of process automation is a combination of low code, no code. Now you may see platforms described as no code only or low code only, but effectively what it means is you use programming elements and link them together in kind of a flow and describe what each one does without having to do code. Honestly, it's kind of like putting together a PowerPoint presentation, right? The first slide is my intro, so that's going to be kind of my starting page. I then add elements to that in the form of graphics and buttons and checkboxes. My next slide, right, is going to take the next step and likely talk to some system and pull up some data. And my next slide is going to allow me to interact with that data. My next slide is going to take any changes and push it into the systems that it needs to go to. My next slide may contain announcements and events and alerts and emails or whatever the actions are, right? But I can do all of that without having to know any of the backend code. I just need to know what I'd like to get done and what system I'd like to work with.
What do they call it when you make a film and you have all the screens?
The storyboarding.
Storyboarding. Thank you. There you go.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. Like if you were to look at it, it would look kind of like storyboarding. And it's just kind of if you can build a flow diagram, you can probably work just fine in no code tools. Low code are a little bit more requirements, right? You have to know some code to really be able to work in low code, but the code is generally as close to conversational English as possible, right? You don't generally have to know any specific coding language, but it does help to be able to read some code. And there's likely to be little code elements that get dropped in to bridge the gap between what the no code pieces can do and what they cannot do.
I don't want to take it off on a tangent. Yeah, I do. But I'm just thinking there are some people I know that you really don't want their conversational English to be the conversational English.
That's true. It's true.
But then I was also thinking about some when I was C programming years and years and years and years and years ago. There were some people you did not want to write C.
That also is true.
They could make something look so like you couldn't even debug one line,
right?
They'd overload the plus operator or something stupid like that.
That's actually one of the problems with kind of low code and no code tools is they don't lend themselves to being documented. Right? Like, I think when they were designed to do very simple things that would take a software development team a long time to do to ultimately get, some very, very simple interfaces built for data. And therefore, by being able just to read through the workflow, you could understand what was being done. As the tools have evolved, as they've developed, and as they've grown, so has their ability to address very, very complex things. But they still don't leave themselves open for documentation. So I don't necessarily have a way to know, like I could probably tell what it does by looking at it, but I don't necessarily know what the intention was when someone did it. Right. So tracking drift, like if I use code comments, I don't say what it does. I say what my intention was in doing it more than what it does. Right. And therefore it becomes really easy to go, okay, well, comment doesn't match reality, so I need to fix reality or talk to whoever made the comment, right? I don't really have the ability to do that in most low code, no code platforms. It's one of the kind of gotchas that I see. It's not major, but it is something that will definitely be encountered.
There's a whole gaping rabbit hole standing just to the right of me, that all around configuration management and pull requests and all sorts of audit trails and so on, which I will avoid for them. I'm curious to know, because am I right in thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but Appian kind of did it the other way around. They had a big platform, and then they were kind of, let's make it easier for people to use this thing. So they built the interface to enable their platform to be more straightforward.
That is true. Yes. Right. They had been a platform maker for years and years, way before RPA and low code, no code were a thing. And they started adding those things to their platform to make their platform easier to use and more extensible, right? More complete, as it were. Today, they have a data fabric. That's one of their big kind of pieces. The Appian data fabric, unlike many other data fabrics, is never the authoritative source for data. That's not its purpose or its point. What it is it's you can almost think of it like a data cache with data transformation, right? So it allows for kind of legacy table formats to be moved into a new data structure that doesn't have some of the performance nor what's the word I'm looking for? Design limitations
Hmm.
that typical RDBMSs do, yet still allow you to access all the data. However, your original system remains the authoritative system,
Hmm.
right?
So it's,
Um,
it's a facade pattern applied to multiple
yeah,
systems.
effectively, right? So huge advantages there. Very interesting to see kind of how they're doing that. It's all cloud hosted. They've added some end to end capability. So they have their own kind of publishing platform for hosting if you'd like to use that. And so you can go all the way end to end out to your customers, and they've expanded kind of the capabilities they have there. You can tell it wasn't designed as like Wells Fargo's not likely to want to use it, use the original version to publish their customer facing consumer banking interface. But they've listened to their customers, and so they've expanded so that you can do more of that. And anyhow, they do all of these things. It's all reasonable. Their focus, however, is on business process automation.
Hmm.
That's really where they play. That's really where they sit. The problem is RPA isn't a thing. There's no RPA is a tool, but it is not also a market. Right. What I'm trying to do is automate business processes that lack end-to-end APIs using it's what RPA is for. But we don't really talk about it that way. We don't really sit down and go inside an organization and go, "Hey, what are the things we're wasting time on, and can we automate those?" Like we don't start there. We tend to start with, "I think this would work. Here's the tool we buy. Now this is how we're going to use it,"
So
versus the other way around, right?
it's kind of tactical. Well, I mean, the having been involved for, I mean, this is dangerously close to giving away my age, but the whole business process reengineering thing uh, was great in principle, and but unless you were going to, it's a bit like digital transformation, if I may, unless you're going to change your entire organization and kind of flip the model entirely, it immediately becomes tactical. It becomes, well, let's sort the sales process, or let's, let's focus on something specific we can deal with,
Yeah, yeah.
because
It becomes a
the
wedge.
alternative's too big.
Yeah. Well, and we're not comfortable with the alternative, and we're not really good at making the alternative small and reasonable, right? I don't think it has to be that big. There's nothing that says that you have to eat the whole elephant all at once,
Hmm.
right? But I think there's a difference between let's take this thing and make it tactical, in which case we tend to not think about the holistic problem, but really the right in front of our face problem, and then make a decision accordingly, right? We pick a platform, we pick a partner, we pick an execution model based on the tactical problem. Whereas if we started with, let's take a look at the organization holistically, right? Let's document our willingness to change. Let's document kind of our maturity for automation and improvement, and let's then pick a platform that fits, and look at some of the use cases that we're going to use and make sure that the platform can handle the holistic needs of the organization. I think we'd be in a far better position than we are today, which is we just kind of wing it and then hope it works long term.
So if I'm hearing you right, Appian could be that platform, but that's not how people are buying
But that's not how
this.
people are buying it. That's not how people are buying any of the tools within the space. Appian's by far the most complete platform I've seen for doing this, which I think is part of both their consternation and their complaint, as it
Hmm.
were, right? Their complaint is there's no like companies like us don't produce research that supports the holistic view across the organization. At the same time, there's no holistic market. Like a company that stands alone isn't really helpful in those kind of research engagements because what am I going to compare you to,
Mm. Mm.
right? At the same time, looking at what they are trying to do, um, you'd think we'd hear about it more, right? You'd think customers would come to us and go, "This is the problem I'm trying to solve," because it's an incredibly valuable problem, right? Modern technology teams, modern technology departments, the goal of them is to solve problems that the business is having in achieving its goals by using technology, right? Effectively managing the friction contained within the technology used in the business. Business process automation is all about using technology to remove that friction, to streamline things, to make things more efficient, and shorten the distance between how the business ideally wants to make money and how the business collects that money, right? And so you'd think this would be a key kind of focal area for IT teams, for technology teams, and yet it's not.
So I'm just remembering a conversation I had a while back, and I'm going to mention SAP, because it was with them, and but all of the, I'm just kind of thinking, wasn't it the case? And again, another hypothesis. I'll throw this out there. Wasn't it the case that the big ERP vendors and the do everything application vendors, Oracle and so on, said, A, you don't need to build anything ever again. You can just use our software. And then B, our software comes with predefined processes, so you don't need your own custom sales process. You just need to follow our standard CRM, or you don't need to do warehousing any different to any of our other customers. So that was what was sold. So, and then you're talking about what you're talking about. Where's the?
Okay, so there's three problems. The first is SAP has about 15 tools to do automation. Until now, because I just had a conversation with them not long ago, they've never had any unification of those tools. So it's not one tool or one platform that does that automation. It's 16, because you have the standard SAP ERP plus the 15 add-ons. Which means there's no cohesion, there's no commonality, there's no consistency amongst the interface, the style, what it does, how it works, how it operates, the language, any of that, right? So you might as well have bought tools from 15 companies. The only advantage you get is procurement only has to write one check, right? You only have one MSA, like one, it's a contractual value, not a technology value. Oracle isn't any better, just for the record. Like, they don't get a pass. The second is they're hard to work with. As organizations, SAP and Oracle are incredibly hard to work with. The word hubris kind of comes to mind, right? The delta between your sales rep and an expert in the thing you're trying to do is 8 layers deep. They're big companies. This is the way it works, unfortunately. Right? I've worked for big companies. The time it takes to find an expert generally eclipses the value of finding that expert, right? As in, I need an expert to fix this thing, to get it to the, say, perfect, say 100%, right? The time it takes me to find that expert outweighs any value I would get from the 100th percentile. And so I just find someone that can get me to the 70th percentile. And that's fine when you're doing kind of general one-time activities. Right? But automation and business process, it's all a stack. So if I take a 30% loss in efficiency for the first and a 30% loss for efficiency for the second, by the time I get to the third, I don't want to do it anymore. Right? And so that's part of the problem. And then the third thing is none of our processes work the same as our competitors. Like, it's cute to think that they do, right? But it's never a greenfield, and Oracle and SAP aren't consistent year over year, right? So if I've been an Oracle or SAP customer for 15 years, they've changed so many things that they've asked me to change along with. My organization cannot sustain that rate of change. Right? I've been doing sales processes. Even if I started greenfield with Oracle sale process from 15 years ago, when they go to change it, you're telling me I have to retrain all my salespeople now to your new version? No. That's not. We can't support that level of change, and we can't support it in cash to pay. We can't support it in production. We can't support it in manufacturing. We can't support, like, there's no piece of the business, and since there's so many pieces of the business, there's no way to support that rate of change. And so you need something that will meet you where you're at, rather than you do what they say. Additionally, their industry teams aren't as good as they'd like their industry teams to be. So if you're not, a Fortune 100 customer, it's likely that you're going to do things very different. I mean, frankly, Bank of Omaha, right? It's a little tier 2, tier 3 bank in the middle of the country um, does not, cannot, and will not operate the same way Chase Manhattan does. Right. And so for them to come and say, hey, we're in Chase Manhattan, and we designed all of our stuff around the way they operate. And since they're the biggest bank, they're the best, and you should do that. They're going to throw you out of the room.
Mm-hmm. I guess a corollary of that as well is, in a decade, a company is likely to have been acquired or have acquired two other companies, and they're going to, just Murphy's Law says they're going to have been using competing platforms. You're not all going to be using the same processes, the same platforms, etc.
Yeah, so, I mean, through M&A at the last place I was at, we had 23 different ERPs at one point.
Oh,
by the time I got there, we got it down. We were reducing it. We got it down to 12. 12 different ERPs. Right.
So I guess there's my answer about rather than having the business fit the platform, which is never going to work. You got to get the platform to fit the business. But then, to your point, it's being brought in more tactically than certainly the vendors would like to make it effective.
Yep. And had we done a strategic view, right, we could have looked at it and gone, well, we have 23 ERPs that we want to get to one eventually, but that's almost a 10-year roadmap. It takes a long time to do that, right? Especially if you don't have infinite money and you're not a 200,000 person company where you have a ton of people you can throw at it, right? We had a very small team to kind of throw at the problem. So if you took a platform, and just because I was at Appian World, I'm gonna select Appian as that platform. If I had taken a platform and said, okay, what are the commonalities across the organization that we actually need to work? Let's abstract those small things from the ERP. We'll build applications that talk to all of the ERPs, pull the data into the data fabric, and everyone can operate within the same interface.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Then we can decide, does Oracle do that better? If Oracle is the ERP, does SAP do that better? Does Microsoft do that better? Whatever the ERP of choice is, do they do that better? In which case it's temporary. Or does this process just remain here and we feed it back into the final ERP, the Omega Design ERP? And that would have been a much smarter way and a much faster way to do it. You could have had two teams kind of working in concert, right? The one team that does the long-term heavy lift of doing the ERP migration, while the other team manages the very kind of tactical addition of process into this low code, no code platform to enable business to work, to enable communication, and to enable commonality of platform at a very, very, very fast rate, but also a very kind of piecemeal, sliver strategic rate.
Mm-hmm. So something I was going to throw in right when you were talking about RPA at the beginning was, in some ways, one of the problems with being an analyst is you start thinking that it's probably a bit like any echo chamber. You start believing what's going on in the echo chamber, and constantly, every time I speak to end user organizations, I'm reminded of the fact that they're so much more complex, and so many things that they've never been able to fix more than I expected. And I've been doing this for 30 years, so it's kind of, oh crap, yeah, we're still here. Okay, good. And RPA is solving some very simple problems, but those are still the problems that need to be fixed, and that's cool and that's fine. And to kind of bring that right up to date, I think the solution approach that you're just suggesting for 23 ERP systems is recognizing that complexity and that the fact that you can't just raise the entire company to the ground and then rebuild it anew in a perfect way. That's never going to happen.
Yeah, you can't, right? You can't even do it with an acquisition. Let's say you're a $5 billion company and you acquire a $50 million acquisition. You can't raise that either and start afresh. Right. I've worked at companies where I've been in M&As where we acquired teeny tiny little insignificant companies compared to us that still ran independently while the technology and process merger occurred over the course of years. Right. Because the reason you bought them is because of how well they operated, how they leveraged their IP, not just because they had IP, and how smart their people were. and you can't disrupt all of that because you want unified process.
Mm.
Right? And it's why I think leveraging a tool set that focuses on BPA, that gives you the rapid development of a low code, no code platform, that gives you the flexibility of RPA. And let's keep in mind, right? We talk about APIs and how RPA is fantastic for systems that don't have an API. It's also great for systems where you can't access the API because the like your organization is massive, and going through all of the steps necessary to get API access for your application, for your use case, it may or may not support it. But you know what? The user interface that you have access to still has the data that you need, and the ability to use RPA to get access to that data is fantastic. And again, doesn't have to be a forever choice. I can use RPA to access an interface of an application that has an API while I'm going through the process of certifying the API for my use, and my application will still work and I'll still be able to do my job. And then once I get granted access, I can simply switch how I'm ingesting the data to the API and have no break in the ability to deliver value. So I really encourage all of our listeners to give it a good thought, to think about it. And if you're curious and you want to know, hey, how do I apply this to my organization? Reach out to Jon or I on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. And my final thought on the subject, because as we wrap up and try and cope with probably another video or something, is it's very much my takeaway is that the process was never the most important thing for the business to get right. So you got to cut your cloth accordingly. Thank you, Howard.
I think my final one is don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. Make progress.
Very good.
On that, this has been The Good, The Bad, and The Techy, GigaOm's podcast on leading edge tech. You can find us in all the usual streaming services and go to gigaom.com/podcast to learn more. If you really want to learn more, you can subscribe to all the research available at gigaom.com and pay attention to the site for some awesome new changes that are coming. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.